Giving a waitress's daughter a dog? What's next? Giving her a scholarship. The laughter that came after was loud, mean, and loud enough to make the cafe quiet. At that moment, the small girl stopped moving. Not simply the words, but also what transpired following. The millionaire CEO took one step forward, and then, without warning, kicked her German shepherd right in the chest with his boot. The dog fell back. People were shocked. The phones went up, and everyone was staring at the scenario that was ready to blow up. But he didn't know, and no one else did either, that this wasn't just any dog. This was the law. A retired police dog, a service dog with many awards who had once stopped criminals from causing trouble. And now he was trapped between the daughter of a black waitress and a man who felt money could make up for anything. You're watching Hidden Worth, where the truth is hidden beneath what we think we know too quickly. And this. You won't forget this black story. Take a second before we carry on. Hit like and leave a comment to let us know where you're watching from. And if this tale grabs you like it did us, think about signing up. What happens next? It's not just a narrative about a dog. That's all I'll say. It's about having power, pride, safety, and a time when the world finally knew who the actual animal was. It all began on a lovely afternoon in Charleston, SC. The walkways felt warm underfoot, and the city was full of leisurely luxury. A young girl named Nyla sat at a corner cafe with her mom, who was working. The street was lined with fancy vehicles, and jazz music played softly through the open windows. She was beautiful, with brilliant eyes, a loving smile, and skin that shone like sunlight on caramel. Justice, a German shepherd, sat next to her. He was so quiet that he seemed like a statue. That was until the billionaire made a terrible joke. And everything was different. Stay with us. You're about to see a lesson that money can't buy. Nyla Carter was her name. Born and reared in Charleston, she is now 11 years old. Not because of anything showy, but because it seemed true. Her grin made others look twice. Warm, truthful. The type that made you forget about all the tension in your life, even if it was only for a little while. She had a nice ponytail and a crisp white t-shirt tucked into navy blue shorts. Her sneakers were clean, and her stance was straight, like someone who had been raised to always carry herself with pride, even in places that didn't want her. She sat erect in her seat with her back straight, and her hands resting softly on her lap. The truth was that most folks in that part of town didn't see Nyla. Not really. She was only the kid of the help. Camille's mom had been working at that fancy cafe for more than 6 years. People there judged you based on your shoes and how you held a wine glass. There was only one black waitress on staff, Camille. The only one who grinned through gritted teeth when customers said things they thought were funny. But Nyla never got mad. Not in front of others. She looked. She paid attention. She murmured into the ear of the only one who always listened back, Justice, when it got too heavy to handle. Justice wasn't just a dog. You wouldn't get him from a shelter or a fancy breeder. He was once part of the Charleston K-9 unit, given to Officer Daniel Carter, who is Nyla's father. They had been together all the time. One day, a call about a robbery ended in death. Officer Carter didn't make it out. Justice did. And since then, he has always been with Nyla. He walked with her to school. Every shift, I waited outside the cafe. She slept curled up at the foot of her bed, always on guard. People stated it was amazing how well he listened, how peaceful. But they didn't know that he wasn't just doing what he was told. He was keeping his word. A man promised him, "If anything happens to me, take care of my girls." So Justice stayed, safe, waited, saw. And what about Nyla? She loved him more than anything else in the world. She didn't have nice shoes on. She didn't have a designer bag, but she had something stronger. She had loyalty. That day, when the light shone through the cafe windows and Justice sat peacefully next to her, Nyla had no idea that in just a few minutes, her loyalty would be put to the test in the most important way. Charleston, SC. In a city where cobblestone streets meet southern charm, old money may be heard in the moss-covered trees. There was a row of fancy restaurants in the middle of the historic neighborhood that locals called the Silver Row. Not everyone ate there. It always smelled like citrus and truffle oil in the air here. The valets wore white gloves. The hostesses had earpieces in, and customers seldom ever looked at the menu since, if you had to inquire how much something cost, you weren't welcome. The Magnolia Oak was a modern, glass-walled cafe with marble counters, $40 appetizers, and wine lists longer than the Bible. It was one of the most popular places on the Strip. The chef's name was tattooed on cutting boards, and their Instagram page had more followers than most local politicians. It was the kind of establishment that made you feel special. But every weekday afternoon, you might see Camille Carter, Nyla's mom, in a black apron with her hair pinned back and no threads out of place. Camille moved like she had done it before, holding trays with one hand, pouring water with the other, and smiling at people who didn't smile back. She didn't mess up. She didn't have the money. People knew she was quick, polite, and quiet. That might be why she stayed. Nyla generally waited for her on the patio next to the front doors. She and Justice sat on a tiny bench under a lovely olive tree almost every afternoon. People who didn't know her thought she was a good kid with a nice dog. But for those who paid attention, the picture was strange. Not many 11-year-olds could sit still like that. And not many dogs could stay that quiet with so many people walking by. People came and departed, lawyers in clothes that fit them, linen-clad retired CEOs, people who are tourists wear large sunglasses and talk loudly. People didn't pay much attention to Nyla or Justice. A few gave tight smiles. Some people just didn't look anyone in the eye, but Justice kept an eye on them all. Be quiet. Be careful. Always in between Nyla and the door. Charleston was lovely, but it wasn't always nice. In a society where prestige was more important than kindness, and skin color and uniforms were more important than names, this small part of the city felt like a battleground hidden behind beauty. Nyla and Justice couldn't have seen it coming yet, but by sunset, the Magnolia Oak would be the center of a moment that would split opinions, make headlines, and show who in this story actually deserved to be called civil. The bell over the cafe entrance sounded softly, but the men who came in were very loud. There are 3 of them. Everyone looked like they were going to be successful, all with the same powerful air, the kind that didn't need to say anything because the world had already bowed to it. Carter Vance was in the middle, age 60. The person who started and runs one of the biggest luxury real estate businesses on the East Coast. He was the kind of guy that made people look. Not because of how he looked, he had long since traded in his good looks for gray temples and costly suits, but because of how he made people feel. He didn't walk. He took up space. People moved for him without being told to. Waiters fixed their ties. The hosts stood up straighter. The manager came out to meet him like he was a king. His business partners followed him, men in blue suits with smug looks on their faces who were laughing at jokes they had already heard. They didn't look around the cafe. They glanced at it from above. Carter's voice was deep and clear, cutting through the air like a knife. Same table as last time. This time, make sure the wine is cold, he stated without even looking at the person he was talking to. Camille gently nodded and took them to a booth by the window. Nyla could see them through the glass from where she was sitting on the porch. Justice moved next to her, his ears twitching. He didn't bark, just looked. Nyla looked where he was looking and felt her gut clench right away. She didn't know who Carter Vance was by name, but she knew what kind it was. Strong, not able to be touched, always funny. Justice changed again, still serene and calm, but now clearly awake. His body was close to the ground, eyes locked. Nyla softly touched his head with her hand. "It's okay," she said softly, but she wasn't sure if she believed it either. Carter looked toward the window from inside the restaurant. He looked at Nyla. Then, for just a second, they fell to Justice. His lip twisted a little, almost a grin. He leaned over to a friend and said something in a whisper. The man smiled and laughed as he peered out the window. Nyla couldn't hear the words outside, but she could tell by the tone, and that was enough to make the air around her feel a little cooler all of a sudden. They all thought this was just another lunch, but it wasn't. And Justice wasn't just watching. He was waiting. It began as a soft voice, the kind of whisper that was meant to be heard. Carter Vance bent over his plate and cut into a dry-aged steak that was probably worth more than Camille made in a week. He chewed slowly, then wiped his lips with the cloth napkin. His eyes went back to the window. "Does that waitress still have her daughter sitting out there?" he asked, not even bothering to lower his voice. One of his friends looked outdoors. "Yes, the same dog as well. I guess that's her bodyguard." Carter laughed. "Sweet. A dog for the daughter of a waitress. Are you going to give them a scholarship too?" The guys laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh, but it was keen, disrespectful. Camille, who was only a few steps away filling a glass of water, stopped, for only a second. Then she went on as if she hadn't heard it. But Nyla could see her shoulders getting tight through the glass. She trained that dog herself? Another man joked. Or is it just naturally good at smelling fried chicken? They laughed again. One of them hit the table. Nyla didn't get the whole idea yet. But she had heard that tone before. The kind of tone that didn't need to say it. Justice got up on all fours next to her. Be quiet. Still. But his body language altered. His ears were now pinned back. The tail is stiff. Carter went on inside. Man, I remember when there weren't kids or dogs hanging out at places like that. Not out front, though. The friend next to him leaned closer. Things are changing, Carter. He raised his drink and said, Not fast enough, with a chuckle. Justice took one sluggish stride forward at that point, not lunging, not barking. He stood still, blocking Nyla's view of the window. Nyla gazed up at him. Shh. It's okay, she said, and tried to grin. Tried to act like the words didn't mean anything, but something in her chest twisted deep down. She wasn't mad, not yet. She felt ashamed, and it made it feel worse in a way. One of the males went back inside and pretended to take a picture through the glass with his phone. Look at that. She looks like she owns the place. Carter smiled. Let her dream. It's the closest she's going to get to eating here. Another round of laughing. Camille's hands were shaking now. Nyla observed her drop a spoon on the floor, then hurriedly pick it up, her cheeks red. Nyla didn't weep. She just sat up a little straighter. And what about Justice? He didn't move at all. But his eyes didn't blink. Justice didn't growl. Not yet. But something changed in him. He gently got up from the ground, his body tall and steady. His muscles were tense under his fur, and every line of his body said, I'm alert. Nyla stretched out and caressed his side lightly. It's okay, Justice, she said softly. They're just talking. But her voice shook, and he was aware of it. Carter Vance had lost interest in being subtle within the restaurant. He was reclining back in his chair and sipping a glass of Bordeaux like he owned the city. This time, he looked back at Nyla with a smile. What kind of mother leaves her child outside like a stray? He asked, loud enough for those at surrounding tables to hear. What if the dog bites someone? Camille stopped moving. She was putting down a plate of dessert when her hand stopped in the air. Justice's ears snapped forward across the patio. The other patrons, who had been quietly enjoying their expensive lunches until now, started to look around. The soft buzz of silverware faded. Conversations went down. Then Carter got up. I'm going to say hi, he added with a grin. Always wanted to meet Charleston's youngest dog trainer. Camille turned right away. Sir, please, she's just waiting. But Carter was already on the move. He pushed through the glass patio doors as if they were made just for him. The light glinted off his watch, and the wind caught the cuff of his blazer. He appeared like a man walking onto a red carpet, not into a child's room. Justice stepped forward and stood between Nyla and the man who was coming up. He didn't show his teeth. He didn't bark. He didn't move an inch once he put his paws down. But he was quite loud. Carter halted 2 feet away. Well, he added with a smile, you look like a little princess. And this, he gestured at Justice, your royal bodyguard? Nyla didn't say anything. She put her hand on Justice's back, and it shook a little. He is just here with me, she murmured softly. Carter turned his head. Really? A big dog for a little girl? Is he trained or merely mad? Justice didn't growl, but he kept looking. The tail didn't move, and the eyes were fixed on the man's chest. The quiet got thicker. A pair at a table close by set down their forks. One of the waiters stopped still in the doorway. The wind appeared to hold its breath, too. And in that quiet, fragile moment, where power met pride and innocence met arrogance, something was about to break. It looked like Carter Vance was joking. He gazed down at Justice, and then at Nyla, as if he wanted them to say something. There was almost no noise around them now, just the faint sound of a coffee cup clinking in the distance. Calm down, sweetheart, Carter replied, his voice light and almost like a song. I'm just messing around. Justice didn't move. His eyes never left Carter's. Nyla's grip on his back got tighter. Please, she whispered gently, her voice quivering. "Don't make him scared. He's a nice dog." Carter laughed. "Is that a good dog?" He said it again, this time in a mocking tone. "Of course, until he goes crazy and rips someone's arm off." He turned to look back at his table as if he were going to tell a joke. Then it occurred. Carter swung his foot and kicked Justice right in the chest without any warning or sign. The sound was terrible, like leather hitting flesh, and the dull thump echoed off the walls of the patio. Justice fell back, his paws sliding on the stone floor. His body hit Nyla's knees hard, almost knocking her off the bench. A woman inside the restaurant yelled. Someone let go of a wine glass. There were loud gasps that sounded like thunder. Carter nonchalantly smoothed his jacket, as if he had simply brushed off lint. His face was freezing, yet he was laughing. He said, "I guess he's not so tough." But Justice was already up and moving again. He didn't jump. He didn't bark. He got up, strong, still. His chest rose and fell once, sharply. Then he looked Carter in the eye again, and something was different. His whole body turned to steel. His eyes were filled with something old and controlled, not mad. Duty. Nyla's eyes were full of tears. "You hurt him," she said in a low voice. Her voice was so low that it was hard to hear above the growing hum of surprised whispers. Justice didn't pay attention to her. He merely looked at Carter. His ears were pinned back, his tail was rigid, and his muscles were tense. He wasn't going to attack. He was going to defend. Camille ran toward the patio entrance, her apron streaming behind her. "What happened?" she yelled. "Nyla, Justice." But Nyla couldn't say anything. Carter looked at his companions and shrugged. Touchy dog. Then he got closer. That's when Justice roared. Not high. Very deep. Measured. Like thunder coming from a storm far away. Not crazy. Not careless. A warning. People started to take out their phones. You could hear the buttons on the records. You could feel the tension change. No one realized it yet, but the moment had been caught. And the video, which was only a few seconds long, would soon go viral. This wasn't simply a dog acting off. This was going too far. Justice was about to answer. An older man put down his coffee at a table in the rear corner of the cafe. He had been sitting there for more than an hour, minding his own thing and enjoying the quiet hum of life in Charleston. But everything changed when Carter Vance's boot hit the dog's chest. Derek Boone was the name of the individual. Former sergeant with the Charleston Police Department. Worked there for 27 years. 12 of those years were spent as a K-9 handler. He didn't move when the dog got hit. He didn't freak out when the crowd gasped or the waitress yelled. He just looked, very closely. His trained eyes didn't stare at the man who was making trouble. They were looking at the dog, how Justice took the hit, the manner in which he got back together, the way he didn't fight back but instead thought about it again. Then there was the growl. Not very loud, not random, not high, in charge, planned. Boone slowly moved forward, gripping the mug tighter as if his body was recalling instincts it had forgotten. He said it quietly to himself. "That's not a normal dog." He got up. Justice was now standing still on the patio, squarely between Nyla and Carter, with his knees stiff, head down, and eyes burning with intense intent. Carter didn't appear to notice, or maybe he just didn't care, but Boone did. He walked out of the cafe, past the frozen host and the manager who was on the phone, and onto the patio. His voice was quiet but forceful. "Sir, I think you should back off." Carter turned around, angry. "Who the hell are you?" Boone didn't answer straight away. Instead, he glanced at Justice and said in a firm, clear voice, "Stay." Justice did what he was told right away. Not a single muscle moved. "Sit." Justice sat down perfectly, with his back straight and his eyes still looking straight ahead. The crowd moved. The phones kept recording. For the first time, Carter's smile faded. Boone moved closer to Nyla and put a hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" She nodded, and there were still tears on her cheeks. Boone looked to Carter now, and his eyes were steady. "You didn't just kick someone's cat. You kicked a trained police dog. That dog is a K-9. Carter blinked. "He's just a dog." Boone stopped him. "No. He's Justice. I've seen that dog work. 5 years ago, he was in a unit. He is currently retired. But don't get it wrong." Boone stared at the people. This dog used to save lives, and now he's doing it again. Carter had a peek around, And the smirks were gone for the first time. There were just eyes left watching him, and they weren't with respect. They were judging him. And what about Justice? He stayed in his seat, but the message was very obvious. He remembered what he had learned. And now, no one else would either. Justice didn't move. He sat next to Nyla like a statue made of muscle and memory, with his breath slow and his posture faultless. But there was a story behind those serene eyes that few people knew and even fewer understood. Derek Boone stepped down next to him and put one hand on the dog's big shoulder. His voice got low, almost as if he was praying. He murmured softly, "I remember you." "Yeah, I remember." The throng leaned in, not sure what to think. Boone looked up and spoke louder. "Justice is his name. He was in a group named Echo 3 5 years ago. Ran with Officer Daniel Carter, who is Nyla's father. There was a break. People looked over at Camille, who was now standing still in the doorway with tears in her eyes. Boone went on. They were famous. Justice wasn't just any K9. He was one of the smartest ones we ever had, finding bombs, keeping crowds in check, and tactical takedowns. He once found a pipe bomb placed in a baby stroller during a parade in the city. Saved more than 100 people. There was a ripple among the throng. Nyla glanced up at Justice with her fingers buried in his fur. She knew part of the story. But not all of them. Boone's voice got softer again. 2 years ago, there was a robbery on the north side. First, Officer Carter went in. There was shooting. Justice was hit twice, but he was still able to pull Carter out of the bomb zone before help came. Camille stopped crying. Boone said, "Daniel didn't make it." But Justice stayed with the body, did not want to leave. They had to give him medicine to calm him down before they could get him in the truck. Now, the quiet was different. More weight. Boone stared at Carter Vance, who was still standing still. Boone remarked, "You think you kicked a dog, but what you really did was kick the partner of a fallen officer. You kicked a hero." Justice didn't need to bark to prove it. He just sat there, completely still, and watched. Waiting. Carter's face had turned white. He looked around at the phones, the whispers, and the looks. And for the first time in a long time, he seemed little. Nyla ran her hand over Justice's head. "Dad said he was the bravest dog in the world," she replied softly. Boone nodded. "He is still." Because Justice wasn't just trained. He was faithful. To his partner. To his word. To the little daughter that her partner left behind. And today, he wasn't trying to protect himself. He was keeping his word. In the distance, sirens wailed. Closer. More noise. Then, 2 patrol cars drew up in front of the Magnolia Oak, their tires making a crunching sound on the cobblestones. The red and blue lights flashed on and off, making the street look urgent and dangerous. The doors opened. 2 officers got out, 1 man and 1 woman, both wearing normal Charleston PD uniforms and looking about with their hands on their belts. The crowd moved aside. The female officer came up first, and her eyes narrowed as she peered about. "We got a call regarding an attack that involved a youngster and a dog. Who's in charge here?" Boone took a step forward. "That would be me for now." She knew him right away. "Sergeant Boone?" He nodded and said, "Retired. But I think you'll want to hear this." She looked at Justice, who was still sitting like a statue next to Nyla. "Be calm, not bothered, but certainly on guard." Boone pointed to Carter Vance, who was now standing awkwardly next to the patio table. His confident stance had changed to one that was tense and protective. That guy kicked the dog, in front of the girl. No provocation, unprovoked attack. At first, the male officer moved closer to Justice slowly. "The dog looks peaceful now. Doesn't seem aggressive." Boone nodded. "Because he isn't. He has been trained. More than just trained. That dog is no longer working." The female officer raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure?" Boone replied. "Look at the tattoo behind his ear." The man in uniform bent down and reached out to Justice with care. "It's fine, buddy." Justice didn't move as the cop pulled back his fur and saw the little numbers tattooed on his flesh. The cop looked up. "ID proves it. Registration for K9S. From 2016 to 2022, it was active. Unit Echo 3. Worked with Officer Daniel Carter," Boone said. The way the female cop stood changed. The way she spoke altered. "I knew Carter," she remarked in a low voice. "He was a good cop." Boone looked across to Nyla. This is his daughter. The dog has been keeping her safe since Daniel died." The officers looked at each other. Then the female cop looked at Carter Vance. "Sir, did you really kick this animal?" Carter stuttered. I didn't know it was a dog for the cops. I believed it was just a stray dog," she remarked sternly. "That mutt saved lives," the male officer said. "Under South Carolina state law, hurting a service animal on purpose is a crime. It doesn't matter if he's retired, he's still safe." Carter took a deep breath. One person in the crowd moved up and held up their phone. "I have it on tape," he added. "Everything. From the time he kicked the dog until now." The officers nodded their heads. "Please send us that video," the woman cop added. After that, she looked at Carter. "Sir, I need you to come over here." And just like that, things had changed. Because the law has come, and this time, it was on Justice's side. That day, Carter Vance didn't get put in handcuffs. Not right away. The cops took him to the patrol car so they could question him. His lawyers would call him back in a few minutes. His PR team is already working extra hours behind the scenes. But what about the damage? The harm had already been done. By the time the second patrol car left, videos of what happened had already been shared on 4 separate sites. There was one blurry, vertical video that was uploaded with the following caption: "Billionaire kicks police dog to protect black girl. Justice." Literally. It had 500,000 views in less than an hour. It had gone over 10 million by dark. On all the main platforms, Carter Vance's name was trending. Not for the empire he built in real estate, not for his expensive homes, but only for one instant of brutality. The internet didn't wait. Individuals looked through past interviews and found remarks where he bragged about not caring for pets and believing some people just weren't worth investing in. Activists told him to step down. People who adore dogs were quite angry. Black communities all around the country knew what had transpired and what it meant. There was more to it than a dog. It was about who owned that dog, who that girl was. The next morning, the board of directors at Vance Global Properties had an emergency meeting. People who owned stock were freaking out. Big clients said they would stop giving money. Overnight, sponsorships fell apart. Carter Vance had stepped down at the end of the week, but everyone understood what that meant. His once polished and strong image has turned into a meme. A joke. A sign of hubris has been revealed. He sought to make a public statement, an apology that wasn't very sincere, given in front of an American flag while wearing a pressed suit. But it didn't hit. Carter talked of misunderstandings and regrettable behavior, while Justice sat calmly at a park next to a small girl whose grin had become the story's heart. Nyla didn't have to say anything. She just went on with life. Justice on foot, having fun with her mom, getting ready for school, and the world saw her, not him. In the end, it wasn't Carter's millions that made the moment special. It was his fault. The error of not giving enough credit to a child who had grace, and a dog who brought justice in more than one manner. 2 weeks went by. The news stories went away. The hashtags took longer to load. But the memories of that afternoon on the patio of the Magnolia Oak still spread around the internet. People thought about justice. People thought about Nyla. And strangely, some people started to worry about what had happened to Carter Vance. He had stopped talking after leaving his job. No press, no public appearances, gone. Until one calm Saturday morning. Nyla and Camille were at the same park they regularly go to. Justice sat under a tree, munching on an old tennis ball. The sun shone on his fur. Then there were footsteps, slow and steady. Camille quickly sprang up to protect, but Nyla only looked. It was him, Carter Vance. No suit, no group of people, no eyewear from a designer. He was wearing jeans and a jacket, and his face looked like it hadn't slept well in days. He halted a few steps away and only had a folded piece of paper in his hand. "I know I don't deserve this," he continued, his voice lower than she had ever heard it. "But I wanted to say something, face to face." Camille moved forward, but Nyla softly reached out. "It's okay, Mom." Justice stayed in his seat, still, looking. Carter coughed. "I've apologized to the press, to my board." He stopped and said, "To my lawyers, but none of that mattered, because I never told the folks who harmed me the most." He gazed right at Nyla. "I was full of myself, mean, and much worse, I was blind, not seeing who you were. what your dad did, and who that dog truly is. Nyla didn't say anything. She just held Justice's collar. Carter went on. I can't take back what I did, but I've given money to the K9 Memorial Fund in your dad's name. Put together a whole scholarship fund in your name. It doesn't make it better, but I hope it works. He then opened the paper and put it on the bench next to her. It's a letter to Justice. Some individuals around had started to gather, although they weren't sure what they were seeing. People held up their phones, but no one spoke. Nyla finally got up, walked up to him. Her eyes were big and warm, and they didn't show any fear. She whispered softly, "You made a mistake, but everyone should get a chance to do better." Then she reached out her hand. Carter stared for a while, shocked. Then, slowly and respectfully, he shook it. Justice got up and moved forward. He didn't snarl. He didn't back down. He just pushed Carter's leg once, and then went back to Nyla. And at that moment, a man who had once thought power was something you could buy, discovered that you have to work for it. Not with money, not by being famous, but through being humble. Because of forgiveness? It changes more than just the news. It makes people different. Don't keep this story to yourself if it made you feel something, if it made you remember that every action counts and that you can always be forgiven. Please like, share, and subscribe to Hidden Worth. Because sometimes the best stories are the ones that remind us of what really matters. Kindness, bravery, and the fidelity of a heart that never gives up.